Was that spooky? Did you think I was a ghost? No, of course you didn't. It was just a bit of trickery on our part, wasn't it? But a lot of people really believe that ghosts exist. They think they've actually seen them. Is that right? Have you seen a ghost, Jackie?
I suppose you could call it a ghost, but in actual fact, I was very young. I didn't fully understand what was happening, but I was asleep one night. I was in a really deep sleep, what they call a REM sleep. And for some inexplicable reason, I just woke up. And I thought, you know, what's happening? I looked around the room, I looked up to the ceiling, I thought, this is silly. Why am I not asleep? And I sort of scratched my hands. I thought, yeah, right, I'm awake. Then all of a sudden, I thought the room was on fire. I saw like some smoke coming out the corner of the room, and I sort of looked, and I thought, oh my God, upstairs flat's on fire. And the smoke was coming through the ceiling. And then all of a sudden, I looked more carefully, and it wasn't smoke, it was mist. A very fine tumbling mist, starting off very small and then gradually forcing its way out. Through the mist was like two figures coming towards me. I thought, this is silly. You know, I'm dreaming it. So I was clawing my arm to make sure that I was awake. And I tried to wake my husband at the time, and I couldn't wake him. He was dead to the world. And these two figures came forward, and it was one small, one large. The larger of the two, couldn't see his face. I know it was a man, and he wore a white gown. And I know it's going to sound really stupid and silly, and I'm not overly religious, but it looked like the Epiphany of Jesus. And with him was a little girl, about 3 years of age, coming right with him, holding his hand. And he stood, and he bent down to her and said, you know, as much as say, he didn't speak, but he ushered her forward. And so she came forward, and any 3-year-old, you know, she put her hands on her knees and she bent down and she said, don't be frightened. Hello, Mummy, it's me. And I looked and I thought, this can't be happening. And the tears were bucketing down my face, literally. She said, I don't want you to be upset, but you've been really upset for the last 3 years. I don't want you crying any more. I've come to tell you that I'm happy and I'm well.
Why had you been upset for the last 3 years?
Well, 3 years prior to that, I had a baby, a little girl. Unfortunately, she died 36 hours after she was born, and I had her baptised and everything.
And 3 years later?
And 3 years later...
This 3-year-old child?
Yeah, she came to, it's as if in my subconscious I was wishing her back, but without my own knowledge.
What else did she say?
And she just turned around and she said to me, she said, please don't cry, don't get upset anymore, Mummy. She said, I've come to tell you that you're going to have my brother and sister. And you're really going to love them. They're going to be all right. Nothing's going to happen to them. But I won't be coming back again because you won't have the need for me.
Has she ever been back again?
No.
Did you have a brother and sister?
A year later, her brother was born, which is my son, who's now 21. Then 5 years later, my daughter was born, who's 16.
And you were asleep all the way through this, Eamon?
Sorry to say this, Eamon is my second husband.
Oh.
So he only knows about the experience that I've told him. And my first husband, he just thought I was dreaming. I was in a dream. I went everywhere. I went to the priest, I went to psychiatrists, I went to psychologists, I went to Church of England, Catholic Church. I went everywhere just to make sure I wasn't going crazy.
You got your money's worth, didn't you?
I had to find out. I had this impulsion to find out if I was crazy or if it was...
What did you find out?
Well, the only sensible answer I got, sensible, I had some weird answers given me, believe me. I mean, the Church of England said I've been visited by the devil himself. So it was the Catholic Church, believe it or not. And I mean, I was Christian Church of England. Now I'm a spiritualist. I believe in spiritualism.
But what did they say? What was the explanation?
The Catholic Church was the only people that gave me a calming feeling of belief. And he said, you should count yourself lucky He said,
Yes, that's
get
right.
on your knees and thank God himself that he allowed his only son to bring forth your child. Remember the saying, suffer little children to come unto me.
Did you
You
say?
said you felt very nice about it. You felt satisfied. I had a couple of, about 3 or 4 experiences. The first one was actually shared by my husband here. We were coming home late one night, and it was very, very wet, a bad winter's evening, and we were driving along a lonely country bypass with no traffic or anything nearby, no houses nearby, and through the rain I became aware of a figure ahead of us standing on the side of the road. Now, people don't walk along there's no pavements or anything. The figure was facing us. It was a man, and as we approached, he had long, dark, sort of curly hair, very long, and he was wearing what appeared to be a ruffly shirt in white. Below that, he seemed to be in black trousers, or I wasn't quite aware of what he had below, but it was dark. But he had very piercing eyes. And as we approached him, this was some time ago, and we used to give lifts in those days. We don't ever do it again now. But we used to give lifts, and I automatically assumed that John would stop and give a lift, give this chap a lift. As we approached, I felt John lift his foot off and slow down a little. And then as I looked at this person, he looked directly at me, and he had very piercing eyes, and I felt just a bit of a shiver. And I didn't say anything. John didn't stop. We drove on. Now, John didn't pass any comment, and nor did I. A little further along, I thought, that's odd. That guy wasn't wet. Where did he come from?
Where did he come from?
Well, who knows? I mean, it struck me at the time that
It was in fancy
the
dress.
circumstances didn't
He was
add
coming
up.
from a fancy
He
dress
was a
party.
man.
You two had probably been to a party and had a drink.
Well, we thought of all the logical explanations,
But there
but
isn't
You'd
a lot-
been drinking,
like-
you two, though, hadn't
no,
you?
No, but I'll
remains-
tell you another one about
it gave me the
John, sorry.
creeps, and that's why I put my foot
Yes,
down
my
again. You
husband-
somehow
my
instinctively
husband-
Yeah, John,
know
you're a
when
sensible
things
man.
don't add
You're a
up.
Yes,
sensible
he
bloke,
was a
aren't you?
skeptic.
Yes, I
You're a
hope so.
skeptic. Was he a ghost? Did you see a ghost?
I'm prepared to believe I might have done. Because the circumstances were so unusual, he didn't seem to be wet. He was teeming with rain.
Nicholas, have they seen
Was
ghosts?
it dark when you saw this figure?
Yes.
Caught
It was
in a
dark,
headlight.
and what sort of time was it?
What time was it?
Yeah, roughly. Sort of
Late at night.
Late at night,
Very
so past
late
11
at
o'clock.
night.
Past midnight?
Could be, yes.
Yeah? Okay,
Yes.
and how fast were you driving? Maybe sort of 40, 50, 60 miles an hour?
Yeah,
Wrong,
40,
yeah,
50, something like that, yes.
Okay, so
They were
you're
exceeding the
driving
speed
down
limit.
a road at about 60 miles an hour,
Yeah.
at night, late
Yeah.
at night,
Yeah.
in the pouring rain,
Yeah.
and you can say for absolutely certain
Yeah.
that he was not at all wet.
This is
How do you
what
know?
is so strange.
How do you know?
Because, all right, well, I tell you in the next piece along. This, and I hadn't had a drink because this was before I had a drink. We went into our local wine bar. Just a minute. Please, darling. Went into this local wine bar.
What's she doing to you? Get your hand off his knee. Oh, she's put it on mine now.
Nobody's told him why he wasn't wet.
Well, no, but I'm just trying to tell him
why
about
wasn't he
the...
wet? He wants to know.
Well, I don't know, that is
How do
why.
you know he wasn't wet?
His
Well,
hair
he
was all
didn't
loose.
look
and his
wet.
shirt
Oh,
wasn't
because his
stuck
hair
to
wasn't
him.
plastered down.
His hair wasn't plastered down.
Yeah, he
No,
looked
it
fresh.
was
So,
plastered
I mean,
down.
you know, it's not impossible though that you actually saw a real figure. That in the darkness and in the rain, I mean, it would be
Yes.
quite obscured. Late at
Yes.
night, when you're
Yes,
both quite
I
tired
quite
from
believe in
driving,
that.
you
But
see a
where-
figure and it looks a little unusual.
Yes.
And you know, I think to be honest with you, perhaps you didn't notice that he wasn't wet until well after he'd passed. Is that right? Did you
Well, I
notice
think
he?
we
Did you
passed
really?
him.
Did you
We
think
didn't
about it
stop
after
because
you'd
it was
passed
so
him?
Yes, I know, but what the point was that when you think about it, there was no car before or after
Well, maybe he'd gone
anywhere
into a
he had-
ditch. I mean,
Sorry?
maybe he'd gone into a ditch and was trying to find a petrol station.
Do these
what I'm
ghosts?
trying to say-
Do these ghosts? Obviously, there's skeptics there, but and Nicholas, do these ghosts exist?
Well, I got one on film.
You've got one on film.
Yeah. I got
Tell me
back,
about it. and We'll show the film
well, I got back one afternoon and my back door was wide open
of a pub.
of the pub, yeah.
Yeah.
And obviously the alarms are all set. And
This is the pub.
this is the pub, yeah.
And tell me what happened.
I
and
wasn't
then we'll
drinking
show
at
it.
the time, mate.
You weren't drinking
No,
at the
not
time?
at the time.
Oh, yeah, we all believe that, don't we?
That is proof as well, because his hair, yeah, his hair was straight like mine before that.
It wasn't very good.
And he's dyed it black as well, it was white, really.
Tell me about this
Anyway,
ghost.
right, we got back, the door was wide open, we thought we had an intrusion, you know, someone broke in, you know. The alarms hadn't gone off, and we reviewed the security tape, and just before the door opens, there's, what appears a figure walking across the room, and just disappears.
We've got this figure now on video. You didn't. Obviously, this is subsequently. You've recorded it.
Yeah, this is an enlargement of, is a split screen on
There
on
you
security.
can see. I can't actually see anything, but I can kind of. I think we're
Well,
freeze-framed now.
If you
Can we go back and
yeah,
do
if you
it
take
again?
It back, you can actually see from the bottom right-hand corner.
Yeah, let's go back and see it again, please. And tell us what we're seeing. Can we get this? Yeah.
Right. What you have now is just before we come back in, there's a figure just appearing on the bottom, walking. You can see it in slow, right in the corner there, and he just walks to the end of the bar and just disappears.
If you look at it close up, it does look like the sort of
Yeah, you can
buttocks,
see-
the back
well,
end
you
of
can
the guy,
see
the
it moving
buttocks
now.
and the bottom of the legs, you know.
Richard, what's going on here? Could you see it?
Well,
I could see I couldn't see a figure, but I could see movement. I could see like a gust.
it's very ambiguous. We investigated this particular case because it's the first time that a ghost would have been caught on moving film, if this was true. What it appears to be, in my opinion, is that in order to get into the pub, you have to walk through two doors that are at right angles to one another, which have glass panels in. And as you open one door and then the second door, that casts a shadow onto the floor.
Yeah, but how do you explain the back door opening up with the alarms not going off? The alarms only trigger when the actual door is open.
Okay, well, perhaps we'll move on to that in a second, but for the moment with the tape, what you get is a sort of ambiguous pattern of light going across the floor, and I think that's what's on the tape here. The second thing was that the back door of the pub swung open quite suddenly and the alarms didn't go off. And, you know, it's just possible on that particular day you didn't set the alarms. The door isn't part of the actual alarm system. And so it's very difficult to work out whether that was a ghostly presence or just somebody being a little bit forgetful.
Well, no, the alarms did go off when we returned. I mean, it was after the only reason that we reviewed the tape was because we thought we had an intrusion, but there's nobody there, you know.
And that's a security tape.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
And
yeah.
so it wasn't something you said.
Oh,
That
no,
happened and you saw
well,
it.
we just-
Do
we
you
thought-
believe the ghost exists?
Well, there's a lot of strange happenings going on there, you know, certainly, but
Do you believe the ghost exists? Was that a ghost?
I can't explain that.
You can't explain
Can I
it.
just
So
say,
you-
can I just say one thing? I kept the pub before Tony. Tony moved in after me, yeah? And like, I never seen any ghosts. I'm being totally honest with you, okay? But we did have experiences, you know, like on more than one occasion, like, you know, there'd be people running up the stairs and kicking the doors where the alarms were set. I know it sounds crazy and people might think, well, Wally was saying it, but it actually happened and I believe in it, you know?
Well, you heard these noises, you heard
Yeah,
people
but
running upstairs, you
It
heard
was like
doors.
sort of scampering, running up the stairs and really kicking the door heavy. I mean, I was in one room, my girlfriend's in another room. It happened one night when Tony was upstairs or my cousin was there before. It happened about seven or
I get
seven, 8 times.
I get alarms going off like 5 o'clock in the morning, telling me that Zone 7 had an intrusion.
Zone 7?
Yeah, which is
Zone is a big pub. It's on the moon.
And when you get there, there's nothing there.
no, Zone 7's not even belled, yeah?
Do they exist?
I say they exist, yeah. This is a book that appeared in my house. I have many items that appear in my home, and this was one of them with a psychic message written inside it where it says...
Hold up, leave that there for the moment. Let my friend next to you hold
All
it
right.
for you, and you can always get it. Let's show you the book.
The book is Alice's
That just-
Adventures in Wonderland, dated
And that just-
1867.
What do you mean it's appeared?
It's called an apport. An apport's when an item or an object appears through time and space as we know it, in a place where we wouldn't normally find it.
Yeah.
Now, I've been having a series of apports for the last 3 years with my home. Up to date, I've had 16 cannonballs, over 3,000 coins.
What do you mean you've had 16 cannonballs? What do you mean?
Listen,
Up to date, I've had 16 cannonballs. Where are have you got these cannonballs
no,
with
your
you?
mate said I couldn't bring it down here. I'm very sorry about
Why
that.
do you mean my mate?
Your mate?
Which mate?
Well, I don't know. There's that many here. I brought them all here for you, and then I got told.
What, you've got them here?
I've got them here.
Oh,
Yeah.
well,
So
we'd
if you
like
want-
them brought over, please. Please, can we get them over and I'll show them. How big are they?
They're about 4 inches in diameter. They're
Why
in my
couldn't-
black bag. Well, I asked to bring it down here. I was told
Well,
I couldn't
we want
bring
the
it down here.
evidence.
I know
okay,
that.
right.
And
Okay, we were going to get them and we'll show them
My
before before the end of the
word
show.
is my bond.
Of course you do.
And when
We
I say,
believe you.
good.
What do you mean?
Oh, do you believe me?
Of course I do.
Good.
Cannonballs just appear.
Cannonballs just
Where
appear.
do they appear?
They appear in my cottage. I live in a small village called Blackford, near Wedmore in Somerset.
And they just suddenly...
And they've been appearing for 3 years.
Not through the windows?
No, through the
Not
walls.
through the door?
Through the ceilings. Because, like my friend
no,
here...
come on.
Wait a minute, right? I've got a burglar alarm system as well.
You
Now,
leave holes. If they come through the wall of the
well,
ceiling, they leave holes.
They would if they didn't materialise and dematerialise and maybe change the molecular structure.
Archie?
Now, wait a
You
minute,
listening to
hang on,
this?
before we have Archie.
Yeah.
Before we have Archie.
Archie, Archie, you can't come through the wall yet,
No,
Archie.
Wait a minute, because I've got one more thing to add, then we can add Archie.
You can talk to
All right.
Archie. Go on, Archie.
We've had a remarkable cross-section. We've had
talking to-
No, we've had people who have seen ghosts. I don't like the word ghost. I rather prefer apparitions. We've had people who have had apports, they say. We've had people who have indulged in a fine frenzy trying to explain these away. And the point is that all this has been done before. It's been done for 100 years. The first survey...
But do they
of-
exist? Do
the
these
first-
cannonballs of his...
No, I am saying that apparitions exist. About 15 to 20% of human beings have seen an apparition or heard something or been touched by someone, and then subsequently they've found that that person could not be there. This has been the subject of large surveys for the last 100 years.
But that's what's important. We're talking about...
I cannot judge this gentleman's
No, you have got my report on it
experience
though, haven't you?
Because
I
I
did
have
send
not
it you.
investigated it, so I therefore can have no opinion on it whatsoever.
That's right. But I see, this is what people need to realise. We all need to have an opinion on it. We all need to open our mind. Often when people say it doesn't exist, it can't happen, all I ask is people open their minds. One day I had a friend with me after I'd had a fall, or shall I say, 3,000 coins. All coins of various sizes and shapes and values. And my friend openly, like my friend here said to me, why can't we see them appearing? And as she said that,
Your
the coins start... Never mind my cannonball.
Your cannonballs have just appeared. On cue. Come on, Patrick, bring them straight in. I mean, they're heavy, but these aren't cannonballs.
Well, I call them
These are
cannonballs.
bowling balls are heavy.
Are they heavy? Right. And where would you play balls? Can we just
that
have
is
a look
really
at it as
heavy.
well?
It is very heavy.
It is
Because
very
there's
heavy.
another significant
How many
thing
ounces
about
we've got?
this.
We've got a bag
16.
full over there, obviously. 16.
But if you also note, let me finish my thing about the coins.
Go
Right,
on.
we saw the coins physically appear on the roof of my healing sanctuary. No noise, no change in vibration, no squiggle like we see on Star Trek or anything like that. In an hour, we saw 31 coins appear.
Frank?
I mean, the professor here was saying that we've got to believe the evidence that we've seen. We haven't seen any evidence. I mean, all we've seen is somebody who's seen a suspicious-looking hitchhiker. Well, I mean, every hitchhiker I've ever seen looks suspicious.
What you're missing, I think, is important.
Hold on,
I
please.
think what you're missing, what is important, is if you look at it maybe from the angle you're looking at it, and if we look at it when the lady and gentleman were in the car, when you're driving a car, you're taking everything into consideration, and it's in that split second that she saw that gentleman, she saw that spirit. Our friend here said she wasn't wet.
That's not evidence. I mean, that's not evidence, is it?
I mean, you actually went looking.
A ghost on a video.
Evidence?
I mean,
What do you call this
Bring
evidence?
his coins. Bring his coins. We got his
call
coins.
this evidence?
I mean, I don't know why you didn't walk on with all. You're causing me a lot of
She
trouble,
wouldn't
you
let
know.
me.
She wouldn't let
me,
you.
your mate.
My mate. Frank,
Now
he's
listen.
got coins as
Well, I
well.
mean, I could say that people were dropping cannonballs into my house, but I mean, they wouldn't necessarily mean it was true,
Would you
would it?
understand what it was? Would you be able to say what you believed it was? This is the problem.
Open that for me. But I want to know what
Because
these
this is the
coins
difficulty.
are.
Because you look at
You're a
it.
liar. That's what he's saying.
That's what he said.
That's what he's
No, I'm
saying.
not saying he's a liar. I
Yes,
think
you
what
are.
he's saying may be
Yes, you are.
confused.
Listen,
He may
I'm
be
saying-
confused about what's actually happened.
No, I'm not confused. I'll tell you, listen, I was a fireman all my life. I give up my life to dedicate my life to spirit. And I look at these are rewards for me. If you look at this one, you can laugh.
We can't get this coin bag open.
Why can't they give you something useful? Why can't-
You're a Ghostbuster, Robin. Is he confused? Is he a liar? Or is Frank right?
I don't think it's either. I don't know what sort of evidence the sceptics will ever accept under any circumstances at all. So commonly it's a waste of time trying to give them any. A colleague and I caught a poltergeist activity with Dutch television a month ago, and a bed depressed itself before got the hard-bitten media people and cameras. We've also got photographs, for example, of Butterflies nightclub in Oldham, where a ghost is seen on a moving video going down a corridor, setting off the security system. It's in Peter Huff and Jenny... Oh, I'm not supposed to mention books, am I? Anyway, it's in a book that you can get. And you'll see a still...
the book.
Oh, it's called Afterlife by Jenny Randalls and Peter Huff. And there's a picture of this guy walking down a corridor, breaking the infrared beam on the moving part and setting it off. That's why the police were called. And I have tons of evidence of this sort, but it won't be accepted by somebody who doesn't want to accept it.
But most of us who are rational and objective and think we've got a scientific mind and want to look at the evidence and the facts, and that's what Frank was doing, we'll accept evidence if it's kind of conclusive. And so we accept evidence that the Earth is round and gravity because we know it, because it can be proved by physics.
Yeah, people accept that because eventually it's overwhelming. I mean, Lavoisier, for example, held up science for 200 years because he said stones don't fly around in the air, and you can't have things which we now accept as meteorites.
You went looking for the evidence in Madame Tussauds, Frank, didn't you? What happened? Why did you do it in the first place?
Well, it's just something that's been held out as a challenge. I mean, Dickens first suggested it about 150 years ago that, somebody ought to spend the night in the Chamber of Horrors, and nobody's been allowed to do it until, a couple of weeks ago.
And why did you do it?
I just wanted to see if it would, how frightening it would be. I mean, it's supposed to be haunted as well.
But I mean, if that makes sense...
Let Frank finish. Go on. And were you frightened?
No, the only frightening thing about Madame Tussauds is that so many people spend good money going there to look at wax works. They don't really look like the people they're supposed to look like.
But that's the place you'd expect to see a ghost.
Of course.
I mean, you would expect, because there's all the kind of, everything terrible happened there.
Nonsense. If I may say so.
What?
Can I... No, I just nonsense was the word that came to me. I
beg your pardon,
Frank was talking nonsense, not you,
back.
Kilroy. I do take talking to Frank. Going to Madame Tussauds and sitting up there with a whole lot of stuffed dummies is very much like sitting amongst some papier-mâché icebergs and saying, I didn't feel cold in the Antarctic. Clever bugger, isn't he?
But, no, true. People expect to be frightened in somewhere like Madame
I'm sure they
and
do.
that's the place where they expect to see ghosts. People go to castles. I mean, this is the strange thing about ghosts, is that they all tend to appear in spooky places.
Really? People come in populous places.
Why are there no sort of hauntings at Happy Eaters, or why are there no spectres at Specsavers or whatever? It's...
Yes, I have an occurrence actually. It was 2 weeks ago in a particular property 2 miles south of Kidderminster, whereas my husband and I were actually talking to the night porter. We'd been speaking for approximately an hour on the subject of hauntings, and the night porter had told us that there were no stories whatsoever, any tales, anything strange at all that had actually happened at that property that he could recollect anyway. I went into the ladies' toilets, which I had noted before earlier on in the evening were extremely warm, and probably the only toilets I've ever seen where inside the ladies' cubicles they actually have radiators. So as I went into the toilet, I opened the cubicle door, I went inside, and before I had a chance to shut the door, I was thrown against the wall, my hand was flattened out, and my feet actually came up off the ground. As my hand was flattened out, I felt a tremendous pressure on my hand, on my finger, and it was slow, it wasn't rapid. I screamed, and at that point it started to ease off. Whatever it was that was pushing me up against the wall was a lot taller than I was, even though my feet were off the ground. And it was, I can best describe it as a shadowy figure, which was more or less swathed, and I still have the bruising on my nail to prove it. And as I went out to my husband and the porter,
fingernail.
When I went out to my husband and the porter who came running to see what had happened, my hand was just pouring with blood. And the experience I had as this was happening was a long, very long chain, as if it was coming from a fair height, rather similar to the ones that used to be on the old mills years ago.
I mean, but this is part of the problem, is that that's a very strong experience, but sitting here now, we don't know whether it was actually paranormal or not. Because there's no hard evidence. If ghosts actually exist, we'd like to be able to see them on film, on a movie camera. If the reports are genuine, we'd like to be able to film the area and suddenly see these things happen.
Yes, but have you ever taken into consideration why these things happen when people don't have cameras, when they don't have films, and when they don't have people with them?
Was it a ghost conspiracy?
I think it is.
But why don't they ever say
I think you could well be right.
This seems to be the only reason why we haven't discovered any evidence after 100 years of
and why don't they ever say anything significant? I mean, if somebody comes to your bed in the middle of the night, I mean, why don't they tell you who's going to win the 230 next year?
I mean, what do you say in your book? What do you say in your book?
Why don't they say anything which you can prove to be right?
The thing is, they do not ring up and make an appointment to have a portrait taken.
No, not at all.
If they did,
Well, they've turned up 16 times with the cannonballs. I mean, you know, that's fairly regular.
Yes, but that's cannonball.
But we have got some kind of evidence. Have we talked about poltergeists? Do they exist?
Yes, they certainly do. In August the 31st, 1977, my family and I had an experience which we'll never forget. It lasted about 18 months, and through as the weeks went on, poltergeist phenomena got really bad.
What happened?
First of all, it started off with a chest of drawers jumping in the back bedroom where my brothers were sleeping, my sister in the front room and mum in the box room. And she said, pack it up, don't muck about, go to sleep. So with that, she went back into her room, settled the boys down. Then she heard a shuffling noise. So she said, I told you children to go to sleep. So she got up, she said, right, that's enough, I've had enough. So she come in and she stood there. After it had already moved, the shuffling, it moved again in front of her. Nobody was touching anything. The boys were in the beds, and she just said, right, up, out, coats on, and we ran. We went to my aunt's down the road, and that was the first time we experienced it.
And how many other times did you experience it?
Lots of other times. Through the weeks ahead, a lot of things happened.
We've got pictures, haven't we?
Yes,
Take us through these pictures. What have we got pictures of? We've got pictures of... Tell me, this is the room.
This is a room where me and my sister were sleeping in the front room, me on the right and my sister on the left.
Yeah.
And what would happen was she'd be pulled out of bed regularly.
We've got pictures of your sister.
Mm.
What's happening here? She's just jumping.
No, it was like pulling her up, and it looked like she's jumping, but she declares that she's being levitated.
How did you happen to get a picture of her at that minute?
Well, there was a camera in the room.
What, all the time, waiting
yes,
for her?
waiting
and
for
you're
this
telling me
to
that
happen.
wasn't she jumping off the bed in joy? She's actually being...
It's being pulled.
She's being pulled. What
yeah.
happened to her when they stopped pulling her?
Well, she just fell to the ground.
She didn't go through the ceiling?
No, she didn't go through the ceiling.
And when
no.
she fell to the ground, did she hurt herself?
Well, no, she just screamed.
Do you believe this?
Yeah, I see it.
You saw it?
Yeah.
You really honestly it happened?
Yeah, honestly.
Cross your heart?
Yeah, cross my heart. Yeah, my life.
Your life?
Yeah, my life.
And whatever else?
And whatever else.
You've also got... We also had somebody trying to determine this, didn't we? We've got film. Let's have the film. Can we see the film?
Did you used to live in this house? You did. Was it more than 50 years ago? Yes. Did you die in this house? Did you pass on? You did pass on in this house. Now, why are you here? Are you unhappy? You're not unhappy. But why are you here? Is it because you want to give us a special message? No. You don't want to give us a special message. Are you having a game with me? Right. As I asked the question, are you having a game with me? It threw the cardboard box and the pillow right at my face. Well, thank you very much. That was a very good answer.
Archie, I suppose are we going to take that seriously?
We take it very seriously because I had a case 3 years previously which was almost a simulacrum of this case, to such an extent that also the two children in their beds were bouncing up and down, absolutely flat, normal beds being almost bounced to a height of 3 feet and then dropping back and then bounced towards the edge of the bed and then off it, whereupon they were badly hurt, and whatever it was left them. Now, when Morris Gross and Guy Lyon Playfair came to me about the case they were investigating, the Enfield case,
here, yeah.
They kept me informed every few weeks or month or two. It was so similar, and I had never published anything about my case. It was so similar that I was able to predict to them at times what should be happening next, and usually it did. I have to take the Enfield case as one of the best researched poltergeist cases in existence, and there are a large number of well-investigated cases. Professor Hans Bender and the Freiburg Institute on the Rosenheim case, a lawyer's office, the Sochi case, investigated by Professor Murder-Ewan MacDonald, I could go on. There
Richard?
are a large
Richard?
number of them.
The disappointing...
I mean, this looks like evidence. There we've got a colleague of Archie's there asking this poltergeist questions and a tap for no and 2 taps for yes. So we've also got other tape which we won't go through of voices and what have you. Is this for real?
The disappointing thing here is, again, what we've got are stills. The photographs were stills. We haven't actually got a video or a film of somebody actually levitating. We've got a still which could be somebody jumping off the bed. With the audio track there, obviously that was a reconstruction. We've only got the audio tape. We couldn't check the room out. We haven't got film of that because it was done a few years ago when there weren't video cameras around, all that sort of thing. So hopefully now, if a similar case comes along, we could get the sorts of evidence which would convince me there's something to it.
Could you convince him?
Well, I haven't got any evidence as such, apart from my experiences that I experienced in my flat, which was the 5th of May last year. We moved into a flat. There was 3 of us all together. After 2 weeks of things happening, they were happening when they were on my own, I was thinking, I'm going nuts here, I'm going mad. It took us 2 weeks. After 2 weeks of me seeing things moving off the walls, the television, the radio playing up, things flying off tables, I actually went to my other flatmates and I said, look, am I going mad? Have I lost it? And as soon as I spoke to my other flatmates, they looked white and pasty and they were looking at me as if to say, you've experienced some stuff, and we started to talk about it. My boyfriend came into my flat and his hair just went absolutely electric. And he said, you must come out of the flat here, there's something really bad in there. He felt like he was being strangled. I'd been hearing heavy footsteps, dragging heavy. I couldn't explain it. I would always check, I would think that someone was coming into the flat and I could never work it out. There were things happening to me.
What kind of things?
Like running the bath, going to run the bath and having drawing pins spinning in the bath before I turned the water on. I cooked dinner in the kitchen. I walked out of the kitchen, I got into the lounge and the saucepan that I'd been using was already in the lounge. It's still hot. I can't explain what we've all been through.
Has she been imagining all this, Jay?
No, not at all. I mean, I was totally sceptical before the incident at our flat, and now I believe
You're
it.
a flatmate?
Yeah,
same
we
flat.
share the flat. We moved in together. And the first day we moved in, stuff started happening. I put a saucepan down on the top of a unit and come back to it later, and it was halfway across the hallway. And the footsteps up and down the hallway, and the doors rattling, and
I'm with you.
And the feeling, it was a horrible feeling in the flat. It was as if someone was pushing on your shoulders all the time.
Depression, and we were all experiencing quite evil thoughts as well. It was like we weren't being ourselves.
And we didn't sleep.
And we, you know.
Yes.
Can't
Well, I've been
explain
called out to houses where folks have had peculiar experiences. I suppose we shouldn't be surprised that there's a supernatural. After all, 50% of people in England still believe in the resurrection of Christ. Of course, that's a physical manifestation. But there is a spiritual world if we take the Christian viewpoint. But what we really need to ask is where is all this going and how does it all fit in? Because there's not only a good spiritual world, but there's also an evil spiritual world, and it appears to me...
But what we're asking is, does this exist? Is this real? I mean, is she imagining all this? Is she, confused or lying with the two kind of concepts we were dealing with earlier on?
You have to judge each particular on its own merits, but the fact of the supernatural... Well, the fact of the supernatural is the first thing you need to establish. If you believe a supernatural, a priori, as it were, as a matter of fact, then you're going to be predisposed to believe or not believe.
Exactly what she's been going through. I mean, I've been suffering since I was 10 years old from paranormal activity, and I had to train myself as a consultant psychic to protect myself from,
What kind of activity? What was your paranormal activity?
Mental harassment, for one, which can actually make you feel a different kind of person.
What do you mean by mental harassment?
Pure torment. You see, I don't see spirits, I feel spirits. I can pick the spirit world up. And I believe that we have all got a spirit. The people who are dead have got a spirit, but so have the living. And if living people...
We've all got our own personal ghost.
Yeah, we have. And if people go around with ignorance...
How do we know which one it is?
Well, I could tell you.
You know I'm
sceptical. You call me in and I'll let you know. Because the point is...
How could you tell?
Because I'm a medium and I can pick up things about your
Well, how
spirit
can you
and
tell?
somebody else's.
Why is your daughter
Don't
having the
point.
experience? Don't point. Why?
Because, you know, no, it's not just my...
You sound like my mother. Don't point.
Well, good. There you go. Right.
Hang on. Nicola, what I'm frightened to use my fingers.
No, let me just finish a minute, please, because I've got a daughter of 8 who's also seen spirits. I've got a daughter of 16. I've got Nicola.
Let Nicola speak for herself. Nicola, what do you do? What happens to you?
I've gone like paralysed quite a few times.
When?
When I've been in the flat on my own.
How do you mean paralysed?
I've just felt like something walking, and I've gone like cold and hot, and I can't shout for help. I can't move or anything.
How often does that happen to you?
About 5, 6 times.
What do you think's happening to you?
I don't know. I thought maybe because I was living on my own, I was scared. And
when you were having these things, did you have a presence at the same time? Did you get a strong feeling of maybe a malevolent presence in the same room?
Yeah. I'm having to bring in paranormal investigations.
Can I just throw up an alternative suggestion? What if somebody told you that was actually an alien abduction? Because over in the States,
my daughter's been seeing aliens since she was 10 years old.
Right, so are they aliens or ghosts?
Well, it's both, isn't it?
Right, so aliens are ghosts?
Well, what authority is doing about it? If we turn to people, if we turn to doctors, we turn to the medical profession, what do we get? We get laughed at.
Well, I won't laugh at you. I won't laugh at you. One of the things we are doing down in Bristol is doing research in precisely these sorts of experiences, which we do believe perhaps form the basis of some of the more curious experiences that people have, like alien abductions and sometimes ghost hauntings. But they may well be psychological and physiological rather than spiritual.
Is there a more serious question here? That the prospect that when you die, you may end up in somebody's skirting board in Enfield.
Very funny. You should come round to my house for a week.
I saw you point.
that was a prank, not my
Robert, can I just quickly say?
You got angry with?
Yeah, I did, because I don't like people's attitudes. When my daughter's suffering and getting paralysed by unseen forces, I've wrote 5 books on the subject. I'm telling you, I know what I'm talking about. I had to become my own specialist, my own consultant. See that man? I'd shake his hand.
Richard.
No, Archie.
Archie.
Yeah, that's what you call a gentleman. No, I'm not messing. You think it's funny, don't you?
I don't think it's funny, but I think some of the
when
things
a
that
little child says to you what they've seen,
strange,
and they're off for 3 days from school,
well, they are strange, and they're also very disturbing.
Well, if they are strange,
they're very upsetting, they make you ill,
all this,
and it's
Tony?
not right.
Can you get exorcism?
Well, depends. There's different forms of exorcism, isn't there?
Did you?
I mean,
my uncle did it. He wouldn't even give me 5 minutes of his time.
I couldn't get 5 minutes the way you talk.
No, it's a disgrace out there. If
I was very lucky.
If you want help, it's a disgrace.
I was very lucky in the fact that I managed to get some help. It all started with a little eyeglass that disappeared, literally disappeared off the mantelpiece, lost. Also, my wife can tell you about some crisp packets and all sorts that were flying through the room.
And people go around calling you mad, and you get
oh,
slandered.
Yeah,
well, no, it's a disgrace because it's not on. Psychic people are normal people.
I've got some photos.
You know,
Can you explain
we've got as much right as skeptics, and you know, yous are harming our children by having the attitude that yous have got.
Can you explain these photos? What it'll show you?
All right, we'll show you the photographs. Yeah, go on. Tell me about them. Tell me about them. They'll come up.
I just like, you know, why I
This
felt
is your son?
That's my son. I lost him in '91. And why I felt this cult presence around me, she says, get camera and take a photograph. So I did. And what come up? And nobody can explain what they are.
Tell me about
Even
it.
Maurice Grouse, they've been to America.
What is it? Tell us what it is. What do you think? That's your wife?
Well, they've told me that's my son on telly.
On the television.
Showing his face, yeah. And they're unexplainable.
This is the face.
Yeah, that's the face.
This is your son, presumably after having grown older.
Yeah, this is 1994. That the recent photos.
Is your son present in your house?
Yeah, all the time, every minute of the day. He touched his wife, and
what does he do?
If she says, "Touch my left hand, Sean," he'll touch her left hand. Things like that.
What did you feel about all that?
First off, she was terrified, but we've had mediums in.
We've had this postcard appear on your television screen too.
We used to go on holiday to Devon, and we don't know if that is the Devon.
But that just appeared on your screen?
Yeah, just like that.
And all that's genuine?
Yeah, well, I'm willing to give negatives to anybody in the world. Let them have a look at them.
You'd rather it was proved not to be the case?
It's been proved. They've been to America. They've been to Kodak. You know, you can't...
Richard?
Well, I mean, it's very
You
puzzling.
can have him if you want.
Okay. I'm not
You can have him. This is your son.
No, negatives.
Oh.
Okay. I mean, it's very puzzling. I mean, skeptics might argue maybe the
Can
television...
you explain it, though?
Well, I can't. I'm not a photographic
No.
expert, though. I mean, if you've been to experts and it's anomalous, then that's the way it is.
Yeah.
But what the sceptics are not
but you're
saying is
there
that...
ain't such a thing.
Well, what the sceptics are not saying is that your experiences are not valid.
But you
or
can't
that-
get the proof
But
of that,
that's
can
what they're
you?
after. They're trying to get as much proof as possible, and what you're doing, what you've got here, is very impressive. If we had more of that sort of thing, perhaps we could work out what's going on.
You're
here.
not very happy with your ghost, are you, or your poltergeist, or your son?
Well, she wanted when it first happened, but now they've told her it's lad. She's not as bothered now.
She's
But
not-
we want shut like, you know, because her life's not same.
You want shut?
Yeah.
You want him to
shut.
go?
Yeah.
Why do you want him to go?
Well, because he's touching her all the time, you see.
He's there all the time?
All the time,
Are you-
24 hours a day.
Are you conscious that he's there all the time?
Yeah.
You feel him there all
No,
the time?
I don't feel him.
No, but
She
your
does.
wife does,
Yeah.
yeah. Can you live happily, Humphrey, with a ghost? Are you happy with your ghosts?
I think pardon,
Humphrey,
Another guy
sorry.
called Humphrey. No, it's
Yeah.
great.
I take part in Richard's viewpoint. We are trying to find the truth.
Well, can I tell you the truth?
Yeah.
I started...
You've got a castle.
We've got a castle, wonderful castle. Have a look at it, come and see it. And
Is it haunted?
It's heavily haunted and always has been.
What kind of ghosts?
Well, you know, I think the castle first went in the 700s and a monastery got done away with, so there might be monthly ghosts. And then my wife's family sorted it in the 1200s and did away with that lot. And so the armies of ghosts from that, and they're very sort of evident and very apparent.
How are they evident and apparent?
I'll go on
Well, they come
with the
up and
rest of the
shake your
ghosts.
hands,
And then they come check out my family. They do, yes. But I think they're very
come on,
protective
Humphrey,
now.
they don't. They don't come and shake
you
your
know,
hand and talk to
I mean,
you.
I tell you, Kilroy, it's curious. And, you know, one get mocked and knocked. But you ask about protection. I mean, I was up a ladder when I was about, I don't know, 10 years, 15 years younger. And it was night. And I was loosening some stones about 2 stories up. And suddenly the stones came free in my arms, and I was top of this ladder. I don't know if any of you climbed a ladder which you put to the base yourself. Anyway, it's a rocky thing. I find myself cascading through this onto rocks below. So
Well, I mean,
I found myself, Frank...
But it's not bad for business, is it, having ghosts in your castle? It gets the tourists in.
Frank, it does get the tourists in. And if you're a pretty girl, it doesn't help you at all being a model if you're a pretty girl. It doesn't help being a model if you're not a pretty girl. So thanks, Frank, for that help. Anyway...
But you're highly independent arbiter on the subject.
Right, you've had a great deal to say, so can I just finish this?
But
So I
you're
land
not,
down...
Humphrey, you know what? You're not going to be able to finish. You're going
I will
to
finish.
You're going to have to talk to the
Come
ghosts.
on.
But the thing is, you've got ghosts. They're good for
They're
you,
protected.
and you're very happy
They're
with your
protected,
ghosts.
They're happy and
Ghosts
they're good.
or not,
They're
we have to
wonderful.
finish. Take care of yourselves. See you in the morning.
If you've ever been the victim of spiteful comments or malicious rumours, Kilroy would like to hear from you. Maybe they were made by a work colleague and motivated by jealousy or envy. Call on 0990 200 567 if you've made catty comments and now regret them, or if you believe straight talking does no harm.